Join me on this journey as we research mythological creatures from around the world. On this episode, we'll cover the fascinating and mighty beasts known as dragons. Dragons are creatures that have captivated the human mind for thousands of years. From stories of heroes saving kingdoms from a fire-breathing dragon, dragons that give sage advice to a king, and of course, their immense presence in pop culture. The dragon is something that people from multiple continents have their own version of. Keep in mind that the European definition of dragon is not what we will be using for the entirety of this video. Instead, we'll cover creatures that are serpent-like. That way, we can talk about more creatures instead of just one. This video will cover several types of dragons, like Eastern dragons, European dragons, and African dragons. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss any of this. Also, leave a comment on what your favorite type of dragon is. European dragons really don't need an introduction, as these are by far the most popular and famous dragons in the world. These are the ones you think of when you hear stories about heroes battling them, kingdoms being scorched, or treasure being guarded by a gold-hungry dragon. When you think of peasants coming back to their village, only to find nothing left but ash and dust. These are the dragons you think of. European dragons have a rich and deep-rooted history that goes back to antiquity. Greek mythology has a large number of dragons in it, and this seems to be the origin of the belief that they guard treasure. There are also examples of heroes and even gods having to slay dragons, like the hero Heracles defeating Ladon, the 100-headed dragon, or Apollo slaying the serpent beast known as Python. By the way, Heracles is Hercules. Hercules is how the Romans, who conquered Greece, said it, whilst Heracles is how the Greeks originally said it. The peak of interest in dragons happened during the Middle Ages in Europe. You must keep in mind that this period was called the Dark Ages due to the literature, technology, and other innovations from the classical era being forgotten or lost. This means that the dragons from antiquity, which oddly resemble Eastern dragons, were not known for some time. This is why European dragons have wings and legs, as they were unaware of what a dragon was supposed to look like. In fact, the first dragon that met what we know as a Western dragon didn't exist until the year 1260. It was in a text called MS Harley 3244, which was a bestiary. European dragons, as we know them, are described as such: a large, lizard-like beast that has 4 legs and 2 wings. Their heads are an ominous-looking thing, with spikes, frills, and horns all about them. They can be a number of colors including red, green, brown, black, sometimes gold, and on rare occasions, light gray or white. Dragons, though depicted as flying, are more than capable of walking and even standing on their back legs. An interesting thing about a dragon's eyes is that they seem to have the ability to zoom in on things that are extremely far away. This would explain why it is extremely difficult to hide from them, or why they can hone in on targets from incredible distances. Their diet consists of a variety of creatures to include horses, cows, pigs, and on occasion, humans. Humans are not a primary source of food for 2 reasons. Humans are typically smaller creatures and, similar to what cannibals have said in real life, they taste bitter. The biggest difference between this dragon and the other dragons that we'll talk about is that these dragons are not respected by humans. They are actually feared for the most part. In many texts, specifically Greek and Christian, dragons are thought to be Satan himself. Like most old stories that you've heard, dragons primarily live in mountains, but on occasion, They are said to reside in the bogs of Ireland. Of course, these dragons will breathe fire, but that is not their sole means of attack and defense. They have razor-sharp claws that could easily dismember a human, teeth capable of the same feat, a tail that is sharp at the end that can slash or impale prey, and they also have spikes and horns on their body. It must also be noted that their blood is highly poisonous. Slaying them and getting it on you is certain death. Like all dragons, European dragons are incredibly intelligent. They have the ability to speak multiple languages, including Latin, read, and they can write. Like many hyper-intelligent beings, they enjoy riddles, which is why you see in fairy tales or literature, a dragon challenges an adventurer with a riddle. Being successful at this can yield knowledge, treasure, passage through a path, or even friendship with the dragon. European dragons do not live as long as their Eastern counterparts, but we do know more about their youth. Dragon eggs, once laying, need about 3 years to hatch. The mother will breathe fire on the eggs to keep them warm during this period. The dragon chicks tend to hoard things, which is why many dragons are depicted guarding and hoarding human treasure. The typical lifespan of these dragons is 250 to 500 years of age, but in some cases, the dragons can live to be 1,000 years old. These older dragons have the rare colors of light gray and white due to their age. Earlier, I said that dragons have 4 legs, but I'm sure many of you have seen them with 2. These are actually different creatures called wyverns. Also, the term drake is used to describe different types of creatures, but the word is a Middle English and Middle Dutch term that was used interchangeably with dragon. However, in modern times, the word drake is used to describe smaller and younger dragons. The word worm is also an old term that was used interchangeably with dragon, specifically in the epic poem Beowulf. However, worms are also described as being creatures that look similar to African dragons, meaning that they are more serpent-like, lacking wings and legs. Similar to African dragons not being all good, European dragons weren't all bad either. If you look at things like family crests, coats of arms, and things like that, you can see that dragons were used often. They were a sign of strength. Some European dragons were friendly, and in fact would enjoy befriending and helping humans, though this behavior was extremely rare. Let's take a look at where all life began. Africa. African dragons are very interesting, as most people did not know that the belief in these creatures existed on this continent. African Genesis, a work by German ethnologist Leo Frobenius, is one of the best and only solid sources of information on African dragons. This piece isn't focused on dragons, rather on authentic African folklore. One of the key differences between Eurasian and African dragons is that these beasts were more serpent-like than anything. Furthermore, they could have 2 or 4 legs. Some have been said to have none, the 4-legged ones being capable of flight, whereas their 2-legged and legless counterparts could not fly. Their diet was exceptionally unique, consisting of only one creature, the African elephant. They would only eat another creature if they were on the verge of starvation, or if they felt the need to kill something, as they never wasted food. They were typically green or gold in color, and their scales would be various shades of those colors. Humans and African dragons lived in relative peace. In fact, people would even seek help from the dragons by offering them an elephant in exchange for assistance. These dragons did have magical powers because of a stone in their brain called the Dracontius. This stone is interesting because if one killed a dragon to try and get the stone for their own usage, it wouldn't work. If the dragon dies, the stone is rendered useless. This is not to say that all African dragons were peaceful In fact, the most well-known of them all is easily the most violent. Apep, also called the enemy of Ra and the Lord of Chaos, was an ancient Egyptian serpent-like creature that battled Ra, the sun god, countless times. Though occasionally described as crocodile-like, Apep is most often described as being serpent-like. Many tribes in Africa tell their stories and history orally, which means that you don't really find images of these creatures. And, as time goes on, the orders become fewer and fewer. This means we don't have a lot of information on African dragons. The Eastern Dragon, sometimes called the Oriental Dragon, is one of the most well-known dragons in the world. The European dragon is likely the only other dragon type that is more known. Countless countries in Asia believe in dragons, but for simplicity, we'll just talk about 3 in this video. One interesting thing is that the Chinese, Koreans, and Japanese all believe that their respective nation is the origin of the Eastern Dragon. This is seen in one of their characteristics. Chinese dragons have 5 toes, Korean dragons have 4, and the Japanese dragon has 3. China believes that as dragons flew away, they lost toes, and the further they flew, the more toes they would lose. Japan believes the opposite. They believe the dragons gain toes the further they fly away. The Koreans believe that going towards China causes the beast to gain a toe, while going towards Japan causes them to lose one. Regardless of which nation they come from, these creatures are truly fascinating. These dragons played a significant role in the life of humans because many of them had the power to bring rain, and sometimes floods. You can tell the gender of an Eastern dragon by looking at a few factors, one being what item is being held by their tail. Males hold a club, while females hold fans. Another difference is that females have straighter noses, smaller scales, and are typically much smaller than their male counterparts. Let's take a look at the life cycle of these beasts, at least according to the Chinese. From the time they're born to when they reach about 500 years old, they are essentially a water snake that doesn't resemble a dragon. From 500 to about 1,000 years, they become a dragon and they begin to gain their scales. This stage, or type of dragon, is called a Chiao. Another 500 years will yield a massive growth spurt, and this stage is called a long dragon. These dragons do not have their horns yet, and they actually represent the scholar. Fast forward another 500 years, and the dragons begin to grow horns, which is a sign of wisdom. Finally, once the dragon is about 2,000 years old, they start to become a Yinglong, a scaleless and winged dragon. In fact, only Yinglong dragons have wings. All other Eastern dragons do not have wings, but all are capable of flight. It is believed that they fly by the use of magic, via a lump in their head, and sometimes they're depicted wielding a wand, which gives them the ability to fly. These dragons can also transform into whatever creature that they want, including humans. They always appear to be the most beautiful and kindest of that species when they do this. Humans can also become a dragon via magic, and there's even a story of a young boy who swallowed a dragon pearl and in turn became a dragon. The Tatsu are Japanese dragons, and there are several types of them as well. There was the Dragon King, or the Sui Ryu. This dragon brought the rain, and was sometimes referred to as the Rain Dragon. Ryu is a dragon that has exceptional eyesight, but other than that, we don't really know anything about it. There's also the Hai Ryo, which is a Japanese dragon bird, said to be much like the Chinese Yinglong. This was the most evolved form of a Japanese dragon. And of course, the Koreans have their own forms of dragons, though there are just 3. The most powerful of their dragons is called Yong, which protects the sky. The Yo live in the oceans, while the Kyo reside inside of mountains. One cool story regarding Korean dragons is the story of the poor fisherman. There is a legend of a poor fisherman who once caught a gigantic carp. However, it begged him for mercy. So, out of his compassion, he set it free. Later, the carp turned out to be the son of the Dragon King, and the fisherman was richly rewarded. Eastern dragons were revered and respected by humans. You can see this if you look at traditional robes, specifically what an emperor would wear. Temples built in honor of dragons also show the respect that people have for them. Dragons are probably the most popular mythical creature to write about, draw, make movies about, and to slay in video games. Dragons in literature have been prominent for thousands of years at this point. Both Egyptian and Greek mythology speak often about dragons. Though in Egyptian mythology, keep in mind that their dragons resemble serpents. Arguably one of the most famous pieces of literature of all time on dragons is the poem Beowulf. The hero and protagonist of the poem, Beowulf, is around the age of 75 when he slays the dragon with the help of Wiglaf. This epic, which is 1,000 years old at this point, has been repurposed into books and, of course, the animated film. Dragons are in many films and TV shows. A few notable examples are Game of Thrones, The Hobbit, Dragon Slayer, and He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Truthfully speaking, dragons make a significantly larger appearance in games. Games like RuneScape, Skyrim, Minecraft, Dark Souls, World of Warcraft, and of course, Dungeons and Dragons. Ultimately, dragons and dragon-like creatures have captivated the imagination of humans for countless generations. From the relatively peaceful and sometimes violent dragons of Africa to the loving and sacred dragons of the East, and the fire-breathing and harbingers of death from Europe, dragons will always have a special place in our hearts. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. Leave a comment for what creature I should cover on the next episode of Mythological Creatures Explained.